Well, hi everybody. Geezer Tony here. I was sitting out here in my backyard among the beautiful flowers and things that my wife and I have planted, and I was trying to think of what my next video could be about. I've been out for about a week with my back. I injured it working out here in the garden, of course, and I thought I'd just come out here and sit and think about what I could do for my next video. And I began to think about back when and the good old days and so forth. And so I thought I would just get a little nostalgic here and talk about the good old days. I know a lot of you geezers like me, we like to talk about the good old days and how things used to be and so forth and memories. And for you younger people, you might want to watch too. You'll learn some things about how this game has changed in the 58 years that I've been playing it. So I started playing golf at age 11 and I'm now 69. So as I just mentioned, that's 58 years of playing golf. And I've seen a lot of changes in those years. I started playing with my dad when I started whacking balls around the yard and at the driving range when I was 10. I couldn't wait to get on the golf course. Back then, golf wasn't cool. And I remember many times, once I became 11, my dad said, "You can go play golf with us." And I played with my dad and his friends. And I can remember many times I had to audition for the head pro just to allow me to go and play. I'd have to go out to the first tee or somewhere, a range if they had it, and hit a couple balls and show him that I could hit it down the fairway and get it in the air and hit it somewhere, not just scuff it along. So that was one big difference then was golf wasn't cool then like it is now. There wasn't a lot of junior golf. We didn't have tournaments. I think I had, even up through my teen years, there was only like one or two tournaments a year to play in. There was no AJGA in those days. And I can remember going with my dad over to Hillendale Golf Course in Durham, North Carolina, and we would pay $3 to play golf on a weekend. And if you wanted to rent a pull cart, it was an extra 25 cents. And back then, everybody walked. The golf courses didn't have electric carts. They just weren't, I wouldn't say they weren't invented, but it wasn't a common thing. I remember the first golf cart I ever saw was a three-wheel Harley Davidson golf cart, and it had the third wheel, well, one wheel in the front, and it had a stick thing to steer it with rather than a steering wheel. But we thought it was the coolest thing we'd ever seen. You could get a full set of clubs, including everything, for about $200 to $300, which was, a lot more money then than it is now. Maybe in today's relevance and inflation, it's the same price. I don't know, but it just sounds a lot cheaper. There were no stand bags back then. You had a bag with a strap and you would lay it down on the ground to hit it and pick it back up every time. Also, they didn't have dual straps on them. And as I mentioned, almost no junior golf back then. High school golf, it was around, the schools had teams. The conference I was in, we were the smallest school there, and we didn't even have enough people that played golf to field a team. But my athletic director allowed me to qualify and play in the state sectionals in the state tournament as an individual to represent the school. And back then, clubs had names instead of numbers. And this was a little bit before my time, but I saw a lot of those clubs as a kid because I was kind of given a set of mismatched this and that, whatever my dad's friends could gather up. And a couple of them even had wooden shafts in them. I wish I still had those. But the clubs they had names like a brassy, a spoon, a niblick, a mashie, and so forth, and rather than numbers on them like they do now. And so I really learned to play at this really bad 9-hole course in Durham that no longer exists. But it was about maybe a quarter mile from the house through the woods. And my dad would drop me off every day during the summer on his way to work and pick me back up on his way home. And I'd play golf all day. And if I became hungry and needed to get something to eat, I could slip through the woods over on the fifth hole and cut through there and go home and get something to eat and go back and finish the day out playing golf. It was a 9-holer, and there was probably times I went around it 5, 7, 8 times a day. Couldn't get enough, still can't. They offered a summer membership for school kids for $25. So that's why I got to play so much golf, because it was pretty cheap. There were a few other kids that played there as a regular basis, and one of them was the son of Mike Suchak. Some of you geezers may remember him as a quarterback for the Duke University football team. He also played on the golf team, and he played on the PGA Tour later. So Mike Suchak Jr. was one of the gang of kids that that played out there. There were probably 6 to 8 of us that some of us would show up every day. Back then, golf shoes had metal spikes on them that made a cool sound when you walked across the concrete. And they also had these flaps on the front that covered the laces. And I'm not sure what the purpose of those were, but you know, everybody thought they were cool. But I'm sure you geezers will remember those golf shoes with the flaps on the front. I remember watching as a kid on TV, Shell's Wonderful World of Golf. And you know, there wasn't a lot of golf on TV like there is now, so we ate it up every time we found something. But we'd see on Shell's Wonderful World of Golf, Raymond Floyd, Ben Hogan, Byron Nelson, even Jack Nicklaus when he was young was on some of those. Calvin Pete, Miller Barber, just some of these really old names. It was cool to watch. And Calvin Pete was always one of my favorites because he hit it so straight. I always pulled for the player who didn't have the advantages that the others did coming up through golf. They didn't grow up in a country club, and maybe their families didn't have much money, but somehow they made it out there anyway. And you know, some examples of that would be Calvin Pete, Lee Trevino, and a lot of people don't know Larry Nelson was 21 years old, maybe 23, I can't remember exactly, when he first picked up a golf club. By the time he was 28 or 9, he was on tour, so that's pretty fast advancement there. Even golf terminology has changed a lot since back then. Have you ever heard of the frog's hair? Well, it's a term that used to be used for the fringe, which it really isn't used much anymore either now. It's called the collar. He's on the collar. Also now it's not really cool to use the term driving range. It's supposed to be the practice tee. There's no longer a pin or a pin position. It's a flagstick in a hole location, which I think is one of the most overused terms on golf telecasts. They'll almost say, well, he just hit it into the hole location. Well, he hit it into the hole. There is still a hole there. Where they put it is the location, but they overuse that, in my opinion. Another one that's noticeable to me a lot, and it's very common, everybody calls the ground where the tee markers are placed, or either the rectangular shape that's made teeing area between the two tee markers and 2 club links back. It forms a rectangle, and everybody uses the term for either of those as the tee box. The tee box is, what tee box are we playing from? There's a tee box over here, and there's a tee box over here. But what a tee box really is an actual box with sand in it. It started back before my day, before the wooden tee peg was invented. They would have a box of sand, moistened sand on each teeing ground, and you would use the sand to pile it up and tee your ball up on it. And now a lot of courses still have a true tee box on the par threes to fill in your divots, and it just has sand in it. But you know, I'm not sure when all this terminology changed, but the meanings of words change over time, in not just in golf, but in life in general. Also, back then, golf was not a verb. Today, they'll say, do you golf? I golfed yesterday. I'm going golfing tomorrow. Back then, it was like, do you play golf? I played golf today. I'm going to play golf tomorrow. But now it's a verb. I'm going golfing. It was kind of the same then as tennis or baseball. You don't tennis and you don't baseball. You play those games, and you play golf. The golf balls. Wow, back then they were made from a very small rubber ball with rubber bands wound around them to the right size, and then a very soft cover called balata. was put on there, and that balata would cut very easily if you mishit it. Also, those balls would spin a lot more than today's balls, so they would curve a lot easier. They were so soft that if you kind of just semi-thin pitch shot, it would put a dent in that ball. It would make it basically unusable for most people. And if you bladed a full shot, it would actually cut the cover, and you could see the rubber bands under there, and it was always shaped. The cup was always shaped like a smile. We call it a smile. That ball's got a smile in it. He put a smile in that one. And as kids, when we played golf, we'd go out in the woods and hunt balls to play with, and sometimes all we had to play with were the ones with the smiles in them. So you would turn it around to the good side where the club was going to make contact with the good side, and you'd hit that ball, and it'd go up through there, and it'd go, and that's all we had to play with. So that's what we used till we found something better. Some of the biggest names in golf balls back then were, of course, Titleist, and there was Max Fly, McGregor Tourney, which Jack Nicklaus used, Spalding Dot. I remember that one. And there were others that, you know, don't exist anymore. And now there are new ones. Callaway didn't exist. The company didn't exist back then. Adams, well, Adams doesn't make a golf ball. I'm trying to think of some of the newer. TaylorMade. TaylorMade didn't exist back then. So a lot of changes in all these years. And just the same as today, for some reason, the Titleist balls cost a lot more than all the others. I can remember back then because people that didn't play golf would be amazed that a dozen Titleists were $15. That's $1.25 a ball. You're really going to pay $1.25 to play golf with that ball? And everybody else's balls were $10 or less, mostly less. Back then, though, they were that much better than everybody else's ball. Today, I'm not so sure. I think pretty much everybody's about caught up with Titleist for the most part. There may be some advantages that Titleist has over some of the other balls, but for the most part, I think they're all close to the same. I went and got some of these golf balls. I paused the camera and went and got some of these golf balls and clubs that I want to show you right now. So the first one, I don't know how many of you will remember this J-toe. We used to see General J-toe on the ball. We found a lot of those because it was a real cheap ball, kind of like the Nitro or something now. And I remember that I don't remember it. I found out later that the company General Tire had these made just the same as today Bridgestone, who's a tire maker, makes Bridgestone golf balls, and Dunlop, which is a tire maker, makes golf balls. I guess because of the rubber plants, the rubber factories back then. But J-toe, General Tire, I'm not sure if they even exist anymore as a company, but I remember their golf balls. General J-toe. We found a lot of those as kids. Also, there was a brand called PGA. That's all it had on it, PGA. Don't see those anymore, but I sure do remember them when I see one. I've got an example of a Max Fly here, except this is a Blue Max. They used to be all red, the little bullseye thing, and the number would be red. And then on the other side, it says Dunlop, and they were all red. This one kind of came out a little later. It's still very old, and it's still a wound ball. But I don't happen to have a red Dunlop Max Fly currently. Here's a cool one. Club Special. Acushnet Club Special. Now, Acushnet is the company that makes Titleist, of course. And they provided a less expensive ball that you could buy at the club. And that's why they call it the Club Special. It was on special compared to their regular Titleist balls. It's still a pretty good ball. We found a lot of those too. And another one of the bigger names was Pro Staff, made by Wilson. And I remember at least a couple of tour pros played this. Tom Kite. Tom Kite played the Wilson Pro staff, and Jerry Pate, and I'm sure plenty of others. I just don't know who they are. And then, of course, we get to the good old Titleist Tour Bellata. So this was the ball back then. This one's a 90 compression. If you got the 100 compression, the number would be black, and it would say 100 there where it says 90. It would say 100. They also made an 80, and they put the 80 on there, and everything here would be red. We used to call it a lady Titleist, but in today's world, it's a senior ball. So those are some of the golf balls that we had back then. And I'm going to take a minute here now and show you some of the clubs from back then too. First, I'm going to show you the golf bag. This is a Titleist golf bag, leather bag from, I'm going to say the 80s, not the 70s. As you see, it's got one simple pocket, a single strap, and then it has a pocket on the side. And in here it was usually a club cover for your clubs in case it started raining. And you could probably put a jacket or whatever in here, put your lunch in there, whatever. It just had 3 simple dividers in there. And as you see, no stand. They didn't invent that yet. No double strap. So when you hit, you just laid it on the ground, hit your shot, pick it back up, put it on your shoulder, and off you go. So that's the bag. Some of the clubs, I'm going to start with the irons. Now I have here my old 1-iron from back then. I don't know why I kept this stuff. I've had these clubs in the closet for 40 years or more, 45 years. I don't know why. Nobody uses a 1-iron anymore, especially one like this. This is an old blade. This is a Titleist blade, and I bought this with the first brand new set of irons I ever bought when I was probably about 19 or 20 years old. Before that, I always had used sets. The 1-iron is the only one I have left out of that set. I guess I kind of knew it was going to become extinct, and I kept it. So the irons that I do use, or did use back then, were the Wilson Staff fluid feel blades with the drill through hosel. These irons were it back in the day. Either these or McGregor Turney's or Hogan's, and I don't remember the model name of the Hogan's, but a lot of people had a Hogan's. These were what I used in the early 70s. And I wanted to show you the difference. If I can get this on the camera, the difference in the size of these from today's. I'm putting this beside of my irons that I hit today. Of course, this is the small one. It's hard to get it on the camera just right, but they're much bigger. Today's, this one is much larger. Maybe you can see it. Yeah, you can see it better from this angle. How much larger the head is and the face is. It makes them easier to hit, among other things, among other designs that they have that they didn't make back then. Back then, it was just a hunk of metal shaped a certain way. Now it's a hollow body with polymers inside and weighting and a springy face and so forth and so on. So, oh yeah, I have a really a special club here. You ever heard of back then, geezers may remember, back then before the pitching wedge, or some companies call it a 10-iron. It goes 8, 9, 10, and the pitching wedge was called a 10-iron. I don't have a 10-iron, but I have an 11-iron. And this is a Tony Penna, which was a brand, and back then, Tony Penna 11-iron. Basically, it's a 56-degree sand wedge. And I didn't play with this back then. I came across this somewhere in the last 10 years and just said, hey, I want that. but I think it's a cool collector's club to have, so I just picked it up. Now we'll talk about the drivers. The drivers back then were all 43 inches, steel shaft, big knitted club head covers. Sometimes you see a fuzzy ball of yarn on the ends just for decoration, and they have their number on them. And because if you didn't have this long, the way the bags were made, they didn't put soft material on the dividers. And if you didn't have a long club head cover on it, you would get wear on your shaft like this, and eventually it would rust and possibly break. So obviously I didn't always have a long club head cover. I probably got one after I started noticing this. So anyway, you take that off, and we're going to look at this club. This is also a Tony Penna driver. It was a big brand, big name back then. Let's see, Tony Penna. And it had an insert in it, and I'm not sure what it's made of, with these metal screws. And that's where the term, oh, you caught that one on the screws, came from, because drivers used to have screws in the head, and they'd say, well, if you hit it on the screws, it'll go farther because it's metal. But look at how small this head is. No, that's not a 5-wood, it's a driver. And I've got my current driver from today just to show you as a comparison. First of all, the difference in the length of the shaft, or the entire club. And secondly, the difference in the sizes of the head. This is unbelievable. No wonder golf is so easy today than it used to be. I've got some putters that I want to show you. Yeah, back when everybody had the old bullseye, I did too, still have it. You could putt right or left-handed with it. A lot of tour pros had it. I can remember Tom Kite putting with one of these. I can remember George Archer putting with one of these, and a lot of other pros on TV. And I did use that putter for a while. And then at some point I went to the Zebra, used this for a while. That's when I discovered that I putt better with a mallet head than I do a blade head, because I used this putter, which is a, not sure if you'll be able to see this on the camera. It's a Ping cushion, and it has a Scottsdale stamp. The company originated in Scottsdale and is now in Phoenix, I believe. And this is one of their original Ping putters. I remember the first time I ever saw a Ping putter. I was maybe 12 or 13 years old and went with my dad to a local tournament to watch some of the players. And this guy had a putter, and every time, and these were the good players and the best players in the tournament, and every time he putted, it would go ding, ding. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And then I found out later it was a Ping putter. Ping was a brand new company back then. They only made putters. And of course, they've turned into one of the biggest club manufacturers in the world through the years, from that time till now. And the original Karsten Solheim has passed away, but his sons and grandsons, I assume, still run the company, and they have grown into a great empire. So again, I want to show you that one more time, the difference in these two driver heads, and look at the difference in the size of the hitting areas. I would say almost twice as much hitting area in the new one, today one, as it was back then. So imagine if you had to hit a ball with this itty bitty wooden driver head, with a shorter shaft, with a metal heavier shaft that you couldn't swing as fast, with a ball that was so soft it didn't go very far, and it spun a lot, and it was really easy to curve, or very, in reverse of that, it was very difficult to hit straight. And imagine how much harder golf was to play back then. So I think I've just talked myself into what my next video is going to be about. So stay tuned, and you'll find out, if you haven't figured it out already, of what that next video is going to be. I'll be back in action next week and I'm going to go out and test out these old clubs. So this is Geezer Tony signing off for now. See you again soon.